Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We're very excited to be here. It's certainly one of the most interesting conversations I think I'm going to have in lockdown. So I'm very excited. And I'm just going to put a little caveat in. I think there's the biggest thunderstorm ever created is about to fall on my house. So if you hear some crazy sounds, that'll just be a famous Johannesburg thunderstorm. And I'll try and mute my mic wherever I can. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. We've got 90 minutes, and I'm really glad to be in a position where I could get two of my favorite people to talk to in one room. Across the impossible odds of geography, virology, timing, it all just happened. So thanks to everyone who made it possible. We'd like to talk today on a topic that's been really spoken about a lot. In fact, if you just look online, you'll see kittens, you'll see all kinds of soft focus memes, and really a lot of inane, what I call digital diabetes, just inane nonsense about this idea of kindness. Today, I hope we can dive into it and talk a little bit more about its nuts and bolts, what to do about it, what it is, why it's important, and not just as a thing that makes you feel good, but perhaps even a strategy to future-proof business. So to talk about this, who else would you talk to other than someone I was very lucky to meet in the recent past? I've always read about Faith, I've always read Faith's work, but finally I was able to meet Faith Popcorn. Hi, Faith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Faith, the thing that struck me about when we first met was a lot of people ask you about the future as if it's some kind of crystal ball gazing exercise, because deep down they want that edge on everyone else. But what struck me about our conversation the first time we met was you're so incredibly present right now, and that's really what you focus on, which I found so much more brilliant than people who expect you to be some kind of oracle. So would you agree that that's a reasonable take?
Yes, I think that's perfect. I mean, I know they called me, this was embarrassing a bit, but they called me the Nostradamus of marketing, you know, and those kind of things. And I will say this, we put a lot of hard work in research interviews, you know, and John can attest to the other John, the smart John. We put a lot of research and, you know, work into our predictions. We've been 95% correct. It's a lot of hard work, but I will give you this. There is a leap. You know, some people like data is the most disappointing thing in a way, because you can have all the data in the world, right? But it really doesn't tell you what's going to happen. So that's us.
And also, anyone who researches Nostradamus will tell you that all his good stuff got great publicity, but he was wrong about a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then, of course, our other guest, my academic mentor, become a long-time friend of mine, but one of the most radical minds in teaching. And I know John hates when I talk about him like this, but often the smartest guy in the room. It's Jon Foster-Pedley, the Dean and Director of Henley Business School. Thanks for coming, John.
Oh, well, I'm not the smartest guy in the room today, am I? So there we go. I never am when you're around, John, as well.
Well, you know,
there you go.
It's quite funny. We talk about the smartest guy in the room, but that may not be the smartest person in the room by any stretch. So that's good. So I wanted to just begin this conversation, just dive right in. And what I thought would be a great context was we're emerging, it seems we're emerging, and seems really is the key word here, but we're emerging from a period of what I might call quite dark leadership around the world. You've got the menace of Putin, you've had the era of Trump, we've had in our own country, Jacob Zuma's kind of what they call the 10 missing years. So there's been a great deal of rule by, let's call it unkindness, a very kind of acquisitive, kind of a dangerous grabbing of assets and power and control. Just the announcement of Joe Biden in the recent days has caused this ebullient kind of celebration. Just like when Jacob Zuma was replaced as the head of the ANC, huge celebration, outpouring of good feeling, no evidence whatsoever that these things will actually change our reality. How do you feel about that, Faith? This kind of
I have to say, I mean, I hate to disagree with you, John.
Please do.
The pretty one, but here's the thing. It will change reality, because what we believe is reality. And we really believe that, in our case, Biden will bring some goodness, some balance, some stability, some sanity. Who ever thought we would look forward to sanity, some folksiness? to America, and all over the world, you know, they've been saying welcome back America. So I do think that in this case it will make a difference. And I know we're going to get to this, but one thing Joe Biden is kind. And I think kind is going to be the new meme of the future. I think that's what people are looking for, a little bit of love, a little bit of kindness, maybe a little money in your mailbox, but we'll get to that later.
Cool. John, your thoughts on where we've come in terms of leadership in the recent past?
Well, it reminds me of that thing is you can never be happy unless you've suffered, unless you know pain, or sadness, because there's this relative thing going on. And so what we've had with the recent past, both here in South Africa, in the Zuma years, the just relentless and public state capture, nobody could believe that anyone would do that and get away with it. And then that's mirrored in what happened with Trump in the Trump years. And that's for me, but I'm very conscious that nearly 70 million people voted for the Republicans and Trump. So there's something there, but seeing this behavior, this corrosive behavior that made me and many people want to cringe, just highlighted how difficult it is to be consistently kind in, as you say, a non-digital diabetes way. How the heck do you do that and still let life progress in such a tough world we live in? So is there room for kindness, or are we going to give way to cynicism?
Yes, I think so. I think so. I know you think so too. You're a big sentimentalist, John, sir. So I picked that up in our chats. I absolutely think there's plenty of room for kindness, and there's plenty of room for love. And it's not just a girl thing. And I think that we're going to see a lot of that in the near future. The kindness in the street, getting in the way of somebody that's being unkind. Maybe we can't really hug right now with the pandemic, but we can verbally hug. And I do. They don't call me Cassandra for nothing. I do see that coming.
So do you think that, sorry, there is thunder. You see, you're not the only one who disagrees with me.
Great sound effects, yeah. Thor is
So would you say that, based on what John was saying about you've got to suffer first and then, emerge, do you think that maybe COVID has set us up for a better future in terms of recalibrating about what's important?
Yes.
It's come closer to us, the pain, the loss. Perhaps this has actually set us up for a more kind future.
Yes, I do. I have to say I agree with John. I don't think that the desire for goodness and kindness, and we have that in our trend bank, in the SOS trend, Save Our Society, it's been in there maybe 30 years. I do think the contrast between the lockdown, virus, people we love being lost, the economy being hit, and then when you see some spark of goodness, it sort of radiates, and it has a sharper outline. So I agree with him, and I will say that COVID is not the only thing that's contagious. Kindness is contagious.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
John, as an educator, John, do you agree with that? And do you think that's an important part of great education, perhaps?
I totally do. There was some research done a few years ago saying that the sort of cynical, negative leaders and managers were perceived to be more intelligent. So if you want to be more intelligent, you have that sort of world weariness. Yeah, man, but it's never going to work. Let's just do this thing. And it's just such BS. It is rubbish. It's harder to be optimistic and awake. It's quite easy to be optimistic and, asleep.
Yeah, you're right.
But how do you be optimistic and awake? And I remember I was in my 20s, and I'd had this sort of period in my life. I wandered through alternative life. When I had hair, it was long, and I was living in ashram.
Pictures.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, not as glam as you, Faith, but there you go. But I remember I was really low. It was a grey day in Manchester. I was working the civil service and some job to pay off, and I was really low, and I was just sitting on the side of this road thinking, what's it all about? And I saw, and this is so classic, but it's true, I saw an old lady crossing the road, And as she was crossing the road, somebody walked over to help her. And it was, I remember to this day, it was like a blind, I felt totally uplifted. And what it is, we get into this sense where you only look at the cynical, you only look at the negative, you only look at the unkind, you start to let it corrode at you. And you just stop noticing the infinite acts of kindness that are holding that balance somewhere in the middle. You see this stuff, but this stuff is held in force by all that stuff we stop noticing. And there is, I totally agree with Faith that kindness is contagious. And what's more, it's totally necessary. You know, we forget to notice that. And in education, what we want to do, motivation and kindness is part of education. I was chatting to my boy the other day. Sorry, you got me in a role here. But I was saying, how do you like to be taught? And he says, well, I liked positive reinforcement. And I said, yeah, if you want a better world and you want people to learn quicker, give them positive reinforcement. And you're going to get that learning curve shooting up. So I'm a great believer in worldly kindness. Yeah.
It's the same way we train a dog. We ignore the bad things and we reward the good things. And people are really no different. I remember a story, there's a woman named Ilse Wagner who works at Investec, which is a client of ours in South Africa, beautiful client, my God. Anyway, she was saying, you get a little bit of tough in your end of the world because you see a lot of people like without a job, sitting on the street, homeless, some of that here too. And she was saying that she passed this guy and she went into the store and she bought what she bought, but it was bothering her. And then when she came out, she gave him some money or a dinner. And, this is the same woman that supports, a whole school of young kids. And this is not, the bank, she loves the bank, but it is her individual support for these children in this school. And I know when we came, we brought them pens and pencils and toys and everything, but that was just for a moment. She's there every day. And I think that when you see the cynicism, right? And the meanness and the madness, there's something that comes out of your childlike soul that is kind and good. And I don't think people are laughing at it that much. And I think that, even though it's not heretofore a masculine trait, because women are supposed to be the softies, I think it's becoming a masculine trait as well. I think it's a unigender trait now. And if you don't believe me, pay the person in back of you on the supermarket line, pay for their groceries. Pay in back of you on the car line, pay for their toll. They'll just rush up and just thank you. We're seeing people leave tomatoes in somebody's mailbox or some cash, a teddy bear, or even a sourdough starter. I think we're finding that we don't have to save the whole world because it's just too overwhelming, so we do nothing. But I think when we see these little bits of sweetness and kindness, I think it's contagious, as I said. It's catching.
So, just from what you were saying, and I think we've all felt that, we've all actually felt, we've experienced that effect on us once we do something good. And yet people resist it. The man at the street light with no money, when your car stops, he becomes invisible to many people. They look the other way. They kind of get on their cell phone.
Right.
They don't want to face them. What do you think it is that stops us from just simply doing something good?
It's guilt. I think it's guilt. I don't think it's evil. I think it's guilt. I think you look at that person and that person reminds you of how lucky you are, how fortunate you are. And I think you can't bear it. And also they're not that pretty and maybe they don't smell that good. And I think that you run from this. I always send I have 2 Chinese children adopted. One is 16 and one's 22. And to her horror, when we pass somebody, I always make her go back and, put some money in a cup, because I want them to say to her, I want her to hear their voice when they say, they say sometimes God bless you or whatever. And that's for a few dollars. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of people turn their back, and it is scary sometimes, you don't open your car window, right? But yeah. we open our car window and, I'm not saying I'm the kindest person in the world. I'm sure I have a lot to learn, but it's, maybe, John, you should have a course on kindness. Maybe it has to be taught.
Well, there's a thought. And there's a very interesting thought, Faith. Love it. How would you, I mean, is kindness taught or is it caught? You know, that's
Just
that
like,
old.
what is it?
How would you get a bunch of people to be kinder? And why would that be a good thing? Why would that be a good thing? Apart from the sort of immediate flush of emotion, wow, we feel great, and then we've got that sort of
Yeah.
endorphin. Why in the big scheme of things?
Because it changes the air. It changes the environment. It changes the molecules. And I think that's the part you could teach, that excuse me, when people are kind, just your surrounding. You know, I'm often maybe not kind. You know where my unkindness comes, just for true confession here, is in my impatience. And, you know, when you go like, hurry up, or, you know, like, run, and why isn't this here? And why didn't they think of it? That impatience. But, you know, I'm trying to get a handle on that, because it's not a kind thing to say. If people could do it better, they probably would be doing it better. So I think that what you would teach in your course, maybe I could be a visiting assistant to you, Jon.
Faith, you've got the job.
I would love it.
In fact, why don't we use the chat section here to get advice?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I saw a wonderful comment here from a really nice man I know, Francois, and he's talking about kindness and appreciation, and saying that from appreciation, optimism is born. And there's something about unkindness. I think to me is, you know, we're kind. I think we're naturally kind when we are even with people, when we see people, when you're engaged, when you're not othering people. And I think if you other people to your advantage, I think it's a mechanism. We other color, we other gender, we other race, we other, you know, or Jews and Christians and, you know, we make people two-dimensional. And I think the moment you can make people two-dimensional, you can tribalize them and you can build up your in-group at their expense. But if you can see everybody's humanity, which is the most dangerous and scary and provocative thing of all, then we can really work together. And I think that appreciating other people's activities does breed optimism. And why would we get out of bed if we weren't optimistic? Yes, to survive, because we're going to, you know, but that's sort of Hobbesian, life is nasty, brutal, and short. I don't think that's what we want. I think we actually want a life that's got quality. And how brave is it to be kind? How brave is it to hold kindness in face of everything that drags you down?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think when we teach our course, we're going to see a lot of great results, because we're literally going to change the atmosphere. You know, I just want to mention that I met a very important person now in my life on your show with Jon, you know, and Carmen. And her name is Corinne Zoid. And I think it was you or Carmen was saying, like, what's the thing you want to do most in the world that you never told anybody? What a brilliant question. And I said, I've always wanted to write a rock song. And Karen, I mean, I didn't even know really that she was such a super rock star queen, you know, said, I will help you. And we've been working on an album all these months. I think it's been 7 months since you asked that question. And what's interesting about it, I'm working with her and her business partner, Corinne Loopser. We're doing this album about the future in review, you know, what the future looks like. It's based on the work. And also Corinne is going to do a documentary based on this. And the reason I bring this up, not just for a free commercial, because we're not ready to, you know, really share it, but is this. Every time I write lyrics, they're like a little bit sad, you know, and dank. And Corinne's always saying, put some love in this, put some, you know, put some kindness in this. You know, she sees it as her job to lift people and make them feel better, not to reflect the sadness that, you know, that we see all around us. It's our choice. Look at something, and do you see the good in it, the kindness in it? Are you going to pass that kindness on? Tell me this. Tell me a person that doesn't look at a little kitten or a little piglet, my favorite, or a little puppy, and feel something primitive in their heart, or a baby. Why are we always smelling babies? I mean, you know, because it brings forth this protectiveness and this love and this kindness. And being a ruffian from the Lower East Side, and I come from the East Village, which is really tough, was a tough neighborhood. I do think that the kindness is the one thing that perpetuates. We've seen it in every culture. How many Germans, or how many Polish people saved Jews? Being a Jew, I'm very, I mean, that was, they called it bravery, but it was also kindness. And I do think that's a little bit of DNA in our system that we need to perpetuate. We need to feed it. How do we feed kindness? With kindness.
Historically, if we look at the world figures who have preached kindness, we often kill them early. We hunt them down and we kill them. And it's interesting to me because Jon mentioned the idea of comedy, intelligence being linked with cynicism and negativity. And I would agree with that hugely. I think a lot of comedians make a living out of being really dark. I did. And yet the greatest stand-up tour of all time has been Ricky Gervais talking about kindness, exactly this.
Yeah. Isn't Beyonce in Peloton celebrating Black colleges? There's Peloton's a bike,
Yeah.
Black colleges and universities. Don't we see our stars, not only Corinne, but others, saying be good, be kind, lift, So I do think maybe it's making a return. And maybe we'll stop yelling at people for being kind. Maybe we'll stop telling boys like, buck up, be strong, be tough. Maybe we'll be a little more gentle and we'll have a lot nicer men when they grow up.
Faith, you spoke quite a lot when we spoke previously about the fluidity of the future, becoming more fluid, more comfortable with fluidity. I know that you phrase it differently, but that's kind of how I assimilated it. I thought it was a really brilliant idea. Do you think that that's part of it? I know, Jon, you spoke really amazingly the other day about your son and your daughter, and just they kind of expected roles in this world right now. Growing up as a young boy is difficult because you're kind of accused of toxic masculinity before you even know what that means, and you become a victim of it. So perhaps fluidity is part of the journey to kindness. It's becoming more fluid with concepts, as you mentioned. Kindness not being the home of the gentle or the meek. We have all these crazy sayings: the meek will inherit the earth. You've got to be cruel to be kind. These terrible confusions around kindness. So perhaps fluidity has a role.
I would say that. I mean, the thing that really fascinates me is that it's about being awake and being aware. So fluidity is important. If you decide you don't have to be awake, you make a model of the world in your own head. This is how the world is. I've got a dogma. I've got a credo. Whatever it is, you've got a whole set of things built up inside you that help you see the world. So the truth, you see the world as you are, not as it is. But if you can see the world, it's constantly changing, constantly confusing. And you're unfiltering to a degree. So you can look straight in somebody's eyes and that person is as the same as you as a human. If you're able to do that, you have to be fluid. You can't stick. I believe in strong opinions lightly held, not strong opinions strongly held.
I love that. Yeah.
So you can be fluid and move. And how can you not be fluid if you're kind? I mean, the essence of it is you have to change how you are all the time in response to what you're observing. And sometimes, and the idea of linking kindness with courage is unbelievably powerful, because to be kind properly is enormously brave. Because everyone's going to get at you at some way or another. Not everyone, but you're going to be got at big time. So you've got to be very, very confident and clear and willing to take on a lot of pressure if you want to be kind.
Jon and also I think it was with Carmen, we were talking about maybe this Christmas, because Christmas is coming. I think one of you was saying kindness instead of Christmas. It takes the Christ out of it. But it makes it more of a gentle, sweet holiday, kindness. And maybe you, instead of buying more stuff for your kids or, wasting money, you just start to give it out. I think what Carmen was saying, like on Thanksgiving, she and her friends, they just make a lot of turkeys and stuff. And, even though you don't really celebrate Thanksgiving, although you have a lot to be thankful for, they take it to the street and give people dinners. I mean, that's pretty kind. And, If somebody's nice to you, do you know that it actually changes your biochemistry for that moment? Your actual biochemistry, your genetic little biology perks up. You know, if somebody gives you a compliment, do you notice that? You feel like an idiot, but you go like, oh my God, thank you. I'm always saying thank you because somebody's nice to me, because when you run a company, nobody ever thinks to say, that was really good, you know, that's your job. But if somebody says that to you, such a sucker, you go, oh, thank you, you know. So I think today we should give a lot of people compliments, call your mothers and, you know, thank them, and then call your fathers, call your grandparents, call your old friends. That's one thing about the lockdown. I think we're, you know, getting on Zooms and talking to people we haven't talked to in a while. So I think if we spread that around, and I'd love to hear stories, maybe if this is okay, John and John. I love how I only have to remember one name, even though it's spelled different. But anyway, if people could write us or write to you and we could share the stories of kindness,
Yep.
maybe we could start a trend right here.
Absolutely. Why don't we start a kind bank? We can put it on.
I love it.
It's
Yes.
deposit kind stories. I think that's a great idea. If you have 5 minutes during the day, write one or come and read one.
Yeah, we'll give away a scholarship to somebody who's being accepted.
Oh, wow.
Right.
What was that? I missed that, John. What was that?
A kind scholarship, you know. So let's give away a scholarship to one of our programs to somebody who has demonstrated long-term consistent kindness who qualifies.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Beautiful.
Brilliant. Okay.
Well, first of our kindness contributions. Okay. Kind man.
Wonderful.
But I had to talk about turkeys because there's a, you know, you can often mistake kindness, and the turkeys are a great example, you know, because turkeys love people. You know, they're bred, they're brought up in warm places, they're fed beautifully, and they just love and love and love people until Thanksgiving, by which time it's too late. So
Well,
they
I don't eat turkey, so.
So, you know, so there is this sort of kindness that's a kind of fake kindness. It's not, you know, so the kindness we have to do for our kids and for the society and trying to not other people and build the world that we want to build, it's got to be one that at the end doesn't involve the destruction of another human being or creation. You're continually in the creative mode. You cannot ever stop that. And the scale of that gets bigger and bigger, because you can have small K kindness, which is kindness and empathy for the person right in front of you. And that, yes, give the beggar that thing. And that's really important. But then when you're running a company, you've got somebody who's got a problem here, you want to really help them. But if you help that person, you're breaking a system, or you're doing something that's keeping 50, 100, 2,000 people, you know, in a safe environment, employed environment. So there's a big K kindness, in my view, which is talking about big systems. How do you manage kindness in big systems, in a company, in a county, a country, or in a world? What does that mean? And how do you live in a way that the kindness matters? That's more than just an emotional schmaltz, and it's something that is powerfully activist, that makes a difference. That's what I'm fascinated by, you know?
Yeah, you know.
Sorry.
Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to kind of move us on to the next kind of topic linked to that. So if you want to comment, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that one of the chairmen I work with, his name is Doug Conan. He was the head of Campbell's Soup, and what he was the kindest chairman I have ever met. And he would meditate in his garden. There was no paper on his desk. I once took a photograph of him reading The Road Less Traveled. There's a chairman, right?
Right.
And the way he demonstrated kindness was he wrote people handwritten notes. And he said, thank you for today. And he had thousands of people working for him, and they weren't mimeographed notes. He wrote those notes. And, you know, another person that wrote notes was Indra Nooyi, the chairwoman of Pepsi. And I was privileged to work with her. And do you know who she wrote the notes to? The parents. She said, thank you for the beautiful job you did raising your child and letting me borrow her or him for this time. And that was amazingly kind. She was tough. You know, I've seen her like be really tough, but she was also good and kind. And it's two examples of high-powered people that were able to disseminate sweetness and kindness.
Yeah. So that was kind of links to the next topic. There are two things. One, John, you spoke about scale, and I would love to talk a little bit about that just now, because you head up a business school that kind of has a much bigger reach than, let's say, someone who doesn't run a big school in Africa. And Faith, you've got a massive audience, and that's kind of what spawned this conversation. Was we were having a conversation, the three of us, and what struck me was you both spoke about doing something good as your kind of plan. So you crystallized it. Faith, you mentioned that your advice to people was adopt a child if you could. I thought that was a wonderful crystallization of your intention. And John, you talk about the white space, this area in our lives in education, the white space of education, where we see children who begin school, how few of them actually finally get a degree, and the massive number of people who fall off the education kind of journey on that. We lose a lot of people. So I would love to talk a little bit about scale. And you started, John, talking about that, how we can scale kindness to a kind of a, let's say, provincial or a company or a multinational level. That's really important. And then after that, I thought we could just talk what you spoke about, this lady who was very tough but very kind. I would love to talk about the non-exclusive and mutually exclusive nature of those two things. It is necessary to be tough, often, in order for kindness to be effective. And we often forget that. It's all kittens and lovely, and there's some beautiful conversations happening in the chat, which are wonderful. But
Yes,
we have to address the hard nuts and bolts of how to make things happen out of kindness. So perhaps let's talk about that part first, the tough but kind, and then we'll move on to the scale.
okay. I
I've
think
got the
people.
thunderstorm now
Okay,
arriving
go
on
ahead, John.
the-
Sorry. Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Okay.
No, you go.
So how about the Jacinda Ardern thought? So there's a person that everyone recognizes as being kind, and she is kind. It's a small country, it's a country I love. But nonetheless, she's managing a country, she's managing COVID. What you've got is a woman leader who's leading that country. Well, there's something about New Zealand which is very, very direct. They don't put up with a lot of BS. They look at people. If you stick yourself up as being better than other people, they cut you down. It's a reaction to the class system of Britain. The emigres who started that, it created an even society. And so when you've got an even, open, tolerant society that is not trying to make everybody the same, kindness isn't making everybody the same. It's quite the opposite. Right. It's allowing massive diversity. How is it that somebody like Jacinda can be kind and yet still govern a country in the face of COVID, in the face of terrorist shootings in Christchurch, in the face of massive earthquakes, in the face of a whole load of issues between Maori and the Pakeha, the settlers there. So you can use kindness at scale, and you can be very tough and you can manage. How do you manage corruption in government or crime or murder without being, and still be kind? There's a humanity about it. That's really important. How do we achieve that? And so we can be kind on a scale. And how kind are we being to the planet and the people in it by allowing the pollution and the climate things? So when you think of kindness at that scale, we have to amplify this to a sense that we are changing the world, being kind but activist, and being enormously strong and brave. I don't believe you can be kind without feeling some pain at the same time.
What I've noticed, to your point, is, and I love her, she brought her baby to the UN. Are you kidding? Talk about sweetness and kindness, if they would ever have me, I would move there immediately. I think you have to be tough on the work. That's what Indra was, tough on the work and kind to the person that made the work. And I think that's the difference. And somebody asked on this chat, by the way, you have a very beautiful chat line here. You should really publish it. It's wonderful. But somebody said, how do you not make people, feel like they're being vulnerable if they're being kind? And you know what? I just want to strip away that idea of vulnerability is so bad. What's so bad? So what? You're vulnerable. Okay, you get hurt. You're human. So you're maybe kind to the wrong person, and then you're vulnerable, and maybe they weren't kind back, or they didn't deserve it. Maybe, maybe. So what? I don't know. I shouldn't talk. I mean, I don't know. I don't like being vulnerable because it's very, very kind of, it feels personally dangerous. But I am vulnerable. So, what can I do? talk about kindness. I mean, there's all kinds. I always tell my kids, I hope I don't get them shot someday. Get in the way. Get in the way. So we'll be at like a big supermarket, like we have a Costco here or whatever, and I hear this baby crying. I don't know. This must come from my childhood somewhere. And my kids go, please, no, mommy, no, 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 no. And I go over there to the baby and I go, and the mother is like ignoring it or whatever, or, and I go, I introduce myself as a pediatrician because I don't want them to get mad at me and go, hello, I'm a pediatrician. I just turn the carriage toward you and look at the baby, because I think unheeded cries create like a crust around your heart. And I think people should pay attention to people who are crying and don't call it an act. Oh, so dramatic. I hear a lot of dads say that actually about their boys, and they're being dramatic. They're not being dramatic. They're crying from their heart,
Yeah.
So I think you should encourage kindness and encourage vulnerability, reward vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean,
I remember you as a comedian, John, telling a story about a kid having a tantrum in a shop and a parent's reaction. That's such a beautiful story. Why'd you say it?
well, it's a simple reaction, and it's interesting. I'll relate to exactly what Faith just said now, because I think Black Lives Matter was an unheeded cry by many people. It was met by a great deal of, all lives matter, which to me is everybody in the room just start crying out of a reaction to someone crying. It was a really dumb reaction. But so the idea of the kid in the supermarket is that your child starts crying often towards the end of the supermarket trip, often when you're in the queue to pay. They have a tantrum. And most parents will meet that tantrum with either violence by beating the kid or removing them. That happens. And they rebuke their child. They bribe them with goodies, give them sugar, or they take them to the car. And none of those are the right answer at all. What they're really curing is their own sense of insecurity, because other adults might judge them as being unable to control a smaller human being, which is a really caveman kind of need reaction to your own child, who that person will tell at a dinner party, will say, I really love my kids. Well, no, you won't, because you use violence or bribery or sort of psychological warfare on them when you outplay it. The real answer, if you ask a child psychologist, is to pick the child up and hold them. And they will fight you for a while, but eventually they will go quiet and they'll do whatever you want, because the truth is they're totally aware of the fact that they've lost control of their emotions and they are humiliated by losing control in front of all these strangers. And strangely, they left their house on total high alert because you taught them that strangers are bad. So we teach children xenophobia because we're too lazy to manage risk with our children at an early age. We teach them all strangers are bad. And statistically, very few strangers actually want to harm your child. But they grow up afraid of the other. Back to John's point, we enforce othering at a young age. It's vital, it's life and death, and it's false. And then we beat them when they react with that in the supermarket. It's a very hard to grow up.
Nobody should beat a child. I mean, if anybody hits a child, they should be absolutely arrested. It's disgusting. I'll tell you a story that will never make you look at crying the same way. In the Chinese orphanages, the children don't cry. So all these people that think it's good that kids, shouldn't cry, why don't babies cry? Because they learn that nobody will come. And it's the silent orphanages full of infants. So let your babies cry, pick them up and love them more for crying. And I just put in a commercial here. If everybody just adopted or fostered or fed one child, just one, this world would be a different place. So just get a baby, get a kid. There are plenty of them out there. Foster one, feed one, hold one. And that's my mission.
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting, John, because we're in South Africa. What Faith is talking about is so beautiful. But we're in South Africa. A lot of people here have either immigrant house helps or people helping in their house. People worry about, well, you're spoiled, aren't you? But these people have absolutely no jobs. But I can absolutely guarantee, looking at the list here, that the numbers of the people here will be silently supporting families, putting children through school, of these people helping, sending money to Zimbabwe or whatever it is, or to the country areas to help support, because there is a natural kindness going on and people don't talk about it. There's one thing I just like to explore. It's a link between what I would call kindness and action. And I was listening to Ted's countdown the other day, which was talk about 2030 countdown to 50% emissions. And there was this Buddhist monk from Plum Village outside Paris talking about how when he was a monk in Vietnam, his teacher was listening. They were all in retreat. There was a question about cocooning earlier. They were cocooning in their sort of temple, but they could hear the bombs in the village. And because they had, in the meditation, they'd had to go through so much. Meditation is switching off. You really got to understand your own problem. So because they'd understood their own suffering through meditation, they were very much in tune with their feelings as well. And they could hear the bombs and they could feel the pain almost of the villagers. And they couldn't help themselves but to get up and go and help. And his story was that if you're meditating, if you're compassionate, it forces action. It doesn't force inaction, because the empathy you have for people forces you to go and help, whatever the cost to you. And I think that is probably the most powerful human dynamic around kindness. It's not something you switch off and just turn on like a Hallmark card. It's something really deep and fundamental about being human.
Yes.
So that's a really good point. Perhaps you spoke a little bit about, Faith, perhaps the biological reaction of the human body to kindness. We talk a lot about kindness as being an act for someone else who's less fortunate. But maybe we should just talk about the absolutely positive effect on the person being kind. Because I think that's a really a misunderstood thing. Often it's seen that if we are charitable or kind, we're in some way caving or, giving something away. And I talk about this specifically in a South African context where we must face the issue of land reparation. It must happen. And this is not even a kindness, it's a justice. But the effect of being kind is good for let's call it the Kindor as opposed to the Kindee only,
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I totally agree. I think you get more than you give always if you're kind. And I saw one of the chats and things like that have happened to me too. She was kind to somebody, or he was, they stole his car. I once had somebody help me with my kids, and I took them to this market and I bought them all kinds of clothes. I mean, really hundreds of dollars of clothes for their family and everything. And then I later found out that they returned everything and got the money, Yes, so what? So what? You give somebody money. I hear people say, I'm not going to give them money because they're going to drink it away or use it for drugs. If that's your pleasure, I'm not in control after I dispense the kindness. I'm just, I get the lift, I get the boost. And if you don't want to use it in the way I think you should use it, well, you don't get to do that. You don't get to rule that. So if you look at this into the faces of monks, you brought up that, or people that are professionally kind, not all of them, but people from religious orders, there is a light there and a glow. And I think that's what you get back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we don't understand the deeply internalized self-work you do by being kind. It's deep self-development. Jon, I wanted to get back to scale, because what do we do? What does an educator do going forward in the world to take the idea of kindness from a meme, from a feel-good, and industrially replicate the practice of kindness as an educator? How can we pull that off?
I can think of a number of ways, but one hypothesis is that education educates us. It's like Ken Robinson talked about, strip mines our mind for a very narrow set of assets. And in that process, we become narrow but very effective and efficient, very targeted. And if the hypothesis is that education often damages people in some ways, then the first thing might be to undamage them. And because we're linear and rational quite often, and we believe in KPIs and targets and all good stuff, the mind needs some sort of rational hook. We teach people system thinking, and we give them a rational way to understand complex situations. And during that, they have to understand that you can't make sense of this problem of life without seeing it from other people's point of view. I'm brought up in a particular sort of way. You can tell I'm British by origin. Faith is a New Yorker, American, fantastic, creative. You are Joburg, creative, highly intellectual. Mamo, I see there, come from a totally different background. I can't see what you can see. I can never see what Faith can see. I can't see Mamo's point of view, being brought up in South Africa. How can I access that? In order for me to understand that, I've got to see it from other people. You are my gift. Faith is my gift. You know, Mamo is my gift. If I can see the world through her eyes, I can see the picture bigger, much more than I can see it in my narrow perception. And then I'll have to unhook some of my perceptions. And so we teach people to do that. And halfway through the process, which seems rational, it suddenly said, oh my goodness, I can't see truth without seeing it through others' eyes. And the moment you get that, you realize you have to have empathy, because the moment you cut out somebody else because you don't like the way they think, you're cutting out part of the truth and the complexity of the situation. And if you're running a business, you can never be really successful, because you need to see the complexity of the situation and respond to it. And so that's one way. The other way we do is we understand that people are damaged, and we spend a lot of time trying to build people's confidence, because we believe that people self-heal really, really well once they're put in an environment that's supportive. And it's emotional. And the thing about us, we're not trying to do good, we're curing ourselves. And in our world, if you're not learning faster than the people you're so-called educating, you're not educating. And so it becomes this wonderful journey of discovery, and it creates a dynamic. And we don't believe in competitive advantage. We'd like to give away everything we do. We started a family-friendly MBA because we didn't think that studying MBAs was very good for families and kids. What sort of educators are creating education that damages relationships and kids? We can do better. So we're trying to create a competitive advantage that everybody will steal to make families have a better time while they're doing MBAs. You know, it's that sort of things that we like to play with, you know?
Yeah. Please steal our innovation and use it.
Yes,
That's great. That's great. It was a similar thing. I met with the Mandela Foundation, who were building libraries in containers and stocking them with books, and then dropping them in locations at schools that didn't have libraries. And when I spoke to the founder of this initiative, he said, we really hope that the kids steal the books. So I said, oh, he said, yeah, because if they steal them, it means they want to read them. And so let them steal the books, take them home and read them, steal them, and we'll put more in. We'll get more books. We would love you to steal our books. And I just thought it was such a wonderful approach to, you know, we have this idea that books become sacred. You know, there's this idea that if you mistreat a book, somehow you've been some kind of savage. Whereas I thought the idea of encouraging the theft of knowledge was so obvious. And yet we let our sort of own ethics and moral kind of lenses get in the way. And we've missed the point, right? Why keep the books locked in the library? It's a really dumb place for a book to be. Rather let it be being read by a thief. What a great place for a book. So it's interesting when you reframe education with the right outcome in mind, how we can really innovate. Faith, are you telling lots of business leaders about kindness going forward, and what's the reaction been?
You know, back to the original talk, you know, what you said to open, I'm finding that I've talked to more company leaders in this time, I guess because they're not traveling or some other stuff. And I think that kindness is coming over them. I think that they, like what John said, they got so scared. You know, maybe they lost a friend, and they're so grateful that they're not sick. And the plane has flattened out, you know, and I think they're a little bit lonely, and they can't be, hierarchy is gone, by the way, in COVID, in business. How much can you yell at somebody while everybody's watching on a Zoom? You know, I mean, you can't crush them. I think people talk about kindness. You know, they've made a study, I think you probably know this, that reviews, which are horrible, it's just a moment of mass sadism, I believe, in corporate America, at least here. Review, what does review mean? It means you get to tell them how horrible they're doing, but you frame it in opportunity, you know, and you know, I think they've learned that in the moment feedback is much better. But I think a lot of these business leaders are becoming more kind, and I'm seeing a lot of them retire. They're doing, I think we're all doing this, a little I think Corinne and I might call, well, at least a working title for the album is The Future in Review. So I think they're reviewing their past and going like, oh, I don't know. And then they're looking at their future in review and they're going, is this really what I want to be doing? A lot of them can afford not to do it. And I've seen a lot of softening in these leaders in this time. So to your point, maybe it took this.
Yeah, well, perhaps there's been some prescience in those people who've reached incredible levels of wealth in the world, so Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, all having reached this point a little early and realized that the main function that they serve is to redistribute their wealth and do good. Look at vaccines, look at education, start these things. Perhaps they found that kind of edge of human achievement a little earlier than the rest of us.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I'm sorry, John, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I thought you.
No, I was just thinking, I was just going back and forth in my mind because this is about being vulnerable too. But I was just going to offer, and I don't know how to organize it. I'm not an operations person, but maybe you can help me. That if people need help adopting or fostering children, if they need help in terms of money, I mean, sometimes the paperwork costs money or, I mean, I would be happy to help, if you would help me organize that because as I said, I'm not an operations person, but I think we have to help each other. So it's not just going like adopt somebody or take care of somebody. Maybe you need money for the paperwork. Maybe you need money for the food for the year. When we adopt a puppy, sometimes we give the food or the veterinary care for the year. Why is a child different? And just think when all those kids get together in 20 years and they all say like on your program, and through the Henley Center, I was saved and I was adopted or I was fostered or I was cared for. Doesn't that bring incredible kindness to business?
The Henley Adoption Program Initiative.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yes. And you know what? It doesn't cost that much. If it's in your heart and what's stopping you is the money, let us help you with the money.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
Let's do that, shall we? Why don't we start?
Are we planning that now as a result of this webinar? Can we say that if you're thinking about it, put your details in the chat. We're going to download the chat. We'll find you and we'll discuss it.
And we'll discuss it and you'll help me see, how to process it. I'm so far away, but I'm going to come there really soon as everything's lifted, to work on the music. But yeah, no, I will definitely help. I would be happy to help.
Wow. Thank you. That's amazing.
No, it's my privilege. It's the privilege of being privileged.
Yeah.
Noblesse oblige. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
I was thinking. I was just thinking of something that's really important. I mean, one of the things we do at business schools, we try and educate. Okay. And so if we take a situation where there are a lot of people, I'll take the adoption one, a lot of kids needing adoption. And so the act of kindness is to help give them better lives. But as a business school and looking at bigger systems, we have to remove the circumstances where adoption becomes a problem. So we have to work on all levels of kindness. We have to adopt, but there's another also in critical kindness, we have to work in ways that might not be visible or even recognized as being kind to remove the circumstances, the unfairness in society, the Gini coefficient, the underprivileged, whatever it takes, people in poverty. So we don't have those things emerging. And so a business school needs to work at those big drivers and start to change the dynamics, educating people so they can run businesses, give education to people who never had access to it, change the dynamics of a country, in a word, so that over a few years you get more of a New Zealand scenario where you don't have big pyramids but flattened things. So that's really part of what a business school does. And the other thing I would say that, I used to be a pilot, and one of the things that used to happen in flying is that the captains of aircraft used to keep crashing airplanes, rather like captains of industry keep crashing their companies. And each case causes massive damage. And one of the big problems was that people weren't telling people up the hierarchy what was going on down here. And if they're living in fear, information doesn't flow and it becomes dangerous. And we're in a world like that. And you'll only share that information if you volunteer it. And you can't get people to volunteer information or be creative by saying, oh, give me that information, or be creative, or be kind. You can't do it. You have to create the circumstances where more equality, where people want to share that information. So kindness is deeply transformational, deeply difficult, and deeply powerful to change the nature and remove dangers from our world, because it lets information flow. It lets us make sense of things quicker and pull bigger levers so we can have a bigger effect on society and the world. And that's why I really believe big K kindness matters.
Well, in the chat, we have some email addresses, so it looks like we're moving forward. And a wonderful comment by Tamsin, who says, do it if you're thinking about it. My brother and I were adopted, and the love in our family is huge and wonderful. So I think we're having a really cool, something is blooming in the chat, which is going to go beyond memes, and I'm thrilled. I think that's amazing.
You know what I wanted to say is that we're looking for the next Nelson Mandela. That could be that kid you adopted in the right circumstances, really.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's brilliant. And someone else you mentioned flying, John, and someone mentioned a rabbi in South Africa who's famously produced a campaign called Acts of Random Kindness, the Ark, and he puts out all these arks to collect money, and you put money in them, and then you give them to someone else. You don't keep the money, you give it away.
That's Rabbi Masinta. I spoke to him exactly. What a guy, yeah.
And I met him on a plane. Funny enough, I met him on an airplane, and I was trying to do a show on an airplane, which was going terribly wrong. And I remember looking down, and there was a rabbi sitting in the front. So I just looked at him, and I went, hey, man, if we bump into a guard up here, I think you should speak to him because he won't want to talk to me. But that's really interesting. So it's amazing when you because there's beautiful chat. I don't want to, I'm not purposefully ignoring all this amazing conversation. We're going to download it and do something with it. There's a lot of it, and it's developing beautifully. So I don't want to interrupt it, but I'm also not going to stop and kind of throw in everything. But I can see people are solving things, and they're coming together. It's very useful because I love how we've crystallized around this idea of perhaps scholarship, perhaps assisting in adoption. These are like absolutely concrete steps. And John, yeah.
And you know, the adoption, or the scholarships and the adoption. But what a business school does, we can get that program, what we can all do, and we can change the patterns, but we can change the mindsets as well. So we need to work on economic things. So we can measure the business school output by the number of adoptions we enforce, but also by reducing the number of adoptions necessary, by changing the whole dynamics over 20 years.
That's true. I was just going to say about the rabbi, being, 100% Jewish myself. There's I don't know what to call it, like a rule or law in the Jewish religion. It's not in the Bible or anywhere. It's almost folkloric, and it says, do a mitzvah every day. A mitzvah means a good deed. Do a mitzvah every day. Just think about that. Just one a day. You have a whole 24 hours to do one good thing a day. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So Faith, perhaps a kindness practice. Something
I like that.
Do,
and maybe it takes practice, John.
Yeah. Do we have to relearn kindness? Perhaps we've been a bit distant from it. Lots of business school history, John, there. The Friedman idea that you've got to just build shareholder value as your only metric. Do you want to chat a little bit about how that's done for us?
So, the world of economics is lovely and interesting. The world of corporations are too. Corporations, in spite of what many people say, have also brought some good things into life. But of course, what's good can quite often become toxic. And so the idea is to hold it at that level. And so we spend a lot of time thinking that that the idea of a corporation is to make money for the shareholders who invested in it, as long as it doesn't harm too much. But the trouble with corporations is that they have a rather limited view of vision. And so when you make a decision, am I going to keep my people employed, make a profit, keep my shareholders happy? Yes. Let's just sign off this slightly dodgy report, as happened with a large consulting firm. Or let's not worry too much about the consequences we've been put out there. So for the first time ever, we're colonizing our kids' futures, because what corporations are doing is they're pushing consequences of action, of climatic or population or environmental action forward, where they never have to pay for them. and governments can't sort it out. The people who pay for those are society and our kids on fewer animals, more crowded conditions, population diversity, which we all need. I mean, David Attenborough was talking the other day that we need these complex systems because everybody, there's such a delicate thing, we all need to depend on it. So what we need to do is really teach organizations not to shove the consequences of their actions into the future or out into society. If you're causing pain, if you're causing a cost, you should absorb it. And that is the nature of the change of corporations and business from shareholder to stakeholder and then to societal understanding, what we might call worrying about prosperity a lot more than you worry about profit. Profit's fine if it's in the service of a good cause, because if you're unprofitable, you're like incontinent, really. Somebody has to clean up your mess, but if you're profiteering, then you're stealing from other people. You have to have a healthy system that's producing welfare and goodness in the world. And again, I'd come back to say, yeah, it's all very well expounding about this. How do you do it? Well, I'm a huge believer in teaching what you most need to learn. And I think Faith has made a wonderful career out of talking about the future and getting her clear insights. Goodness knows where she got them from, but they were there, wonderful. And people listen to them. That's helped people. But we should teach what we want to learn. If you want to learn practice, try and practice it. If you want to learn kindness, try and practice it. If you want to learn anything, try and teach it, because that's the best way of learning. We're all so cognitively limited. The best way to grow is to teach and try and experiment and push it out there. And why not? I mean, life's short. What else are you going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just saw Carmen wrote kindness is destiny, and it is our destiny. I was going to say, and if adopting a child or mentoring it or fostering it seems so overwhelming, this is what I did. Please take this in the right way. Adopt a dog, because that dog will teach you, in a very basic way, what kindness can bring you. And that's how I graduated to adopting, my children. And I just wish, China was so tough about letting you adopt a whole bunch. But I don't know anybody that's walked through an orphanage that didn't want to take 6. I'm just asking you to take 1. Don't get scared. But no, yeah, you will get it back 1,000 times. And you know how you'll get it back? They're not going to be grateful. I don't want my kids to be grateful. They saved my life. I didn't save theirs. They made me much nicer, much kinder person. And they're not going to thank you for this. They shouldn't thank you. The universe will thank you. Not that kid. That kid's going to feel perfectly entitled to have you as their mother and father or mother or whatever. That's the thanks you're going to get, because they're going to feel entitled to being loved, entitled to the kindness, entitled to the good home, entitled to they are entitled because now they're your child.
Yeah. So any act that is simply you trying to buy moral credits, that's not kindness at all.
No, that's bargaining with the devil.
I loved what Faith said earlier about, be tough on the work and be kind on the person. And I think for me, that's not just the work at work. I think it's the inner work as well. I think when you're doing your inner work of scrutinizing, because we all have shadows, we all have our dark side. There's wonderful allegorical legends, almost, stereotypical stories, about the archetypes rather, that you can read that affect us. We all have that. Running away from that and paying off and subduing that with an act of kindness so you don't feel the darkness, that's not kindness. The real kindness is embracing that and knowing that it's not actually you. You're not defined by your thoughts or by that dark side of yourself. That's part of you, but it doesn't have to define you. If you can absorb it and understand it, hear it, and still act well without running for it, you become a much fuller person and frankly, a much more powerful person, a person who can do things in the world. And you're not full of yourself because you can see this darkness and you're not better than anybody else. But it allows you to try. And we all have that possibility of our own individual practice of getting over that. So be hard on that work. And when I say hard, be disciplined and don't be scared of your own darkness. Face it. Now I know, John, you've got wonderful stories of your background and you really should share some because they help people so much. I mean, really, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Well, this is why John is my favorite teacher, Faith. I really didn't belong in a business school at all, if you count the traditional business schools. But somehow John thought I should join the school. But I used to be fairly dark, Faith. You know, a good party for me wasn't a party unless it ended at the cardiac high care unit of a hospital. If your medical insurance didn't pay your party bill, it wasn't a great night. So I had some pretty dark times. But everything John said, I would agree with, and I wouldn't trade my past for one instant, because I think it gives you a certain lens on the world, and that's why I was asking early on about the sort of the wrestling with our darker nature. I think it's a really interesting dance. I don't think that you get over it, and certainly in my own kind of getting better. I've been in rehab for a long time, and it's been really good for me. But some of the things I said when I sort of got to 15 years, I wrote some stuff down about what I thought. I don't follow the 12 steps. I struggle with some of what they teach, because I feel to be powerless at the beginning of treating an addiction is a really difficult proposition. I think they ask you to say that you are powerless at this point. And I always say to young people, you're not powerless at this point. You made a massively powerful decision to change your life. So I want to say that you do have power. You just put it somewhere else, or you've forgotten it. So don't get young people or new people in recovery to admit powerlessness, because it's a dangerous proposition to look at a mountain and go, well, I'm empty, now I have to climb it. So it's interesting for me, but I always say, when you feel those urges come on, do the opposite. So in line with this conversation, if you need something, give something. You know, if you need help someone, serve someone, and go the other way. Don't be needy, you know, be doing and get something done. And it seems to be a good practice for me, you know, in that world. And I wouldn't have learned that if I hadn't been in some pretty dark alleyways. So it's an interesting one. And I've seen acts of kindness. You know, I'll tell you one story.
Okay, good.
My dad, who is not with us anymore, but when I went to rehab, on the last day of rehab, we were very close. He was a pretty good guy. And on the last day of your rehab, they invite your family to come and kind of have like a session with you in the rehab. So my partner at the time called me and said, listen, I just want you to know that your family's going to do a tough love intervention tomorrow, and they're going to tell you that if you ever mess up again, they won't sort of have your back. And I just wanted to let you know that. So I was like, okay, well, you know, they must do whatever that they need to do, because
that's so mean.
It is pretty mean. So my dad, the next day, when we all arrived at the meeting, before anybody could talk, my dad just said, before we start, I just need to say something. These people are all going to tell you that if you ever make another mistake, they're not going to look after you. I am. He said, I'm sorry, everyone. I know that wasn't the plan, but I got to tell this guy that I got his back. And, you know, that was something which never left me. Whenever I felt like I might fall off the wagon, that put me straight back on, because I would never let that kind of commitment down. I just felt that was really brave and vulnerable, and he was risking the wrath of my mum, who means well, but she's quite sort of, you know, binary. And it was that act of kindness that I think was one of the most powerful, you know, examples I've ever seen, because he took a risk of not being the big man and waving the big stick. He went, hey, I'm vulnerable here. What are we going to do with my vulnerability? And then I was like, I think I need to look after that with you. So that was a really powerful lesson for me.
It's a beautiful story. Everybody deserves a second chance and a third.
Yeah. And
so I'm fascinated by the thought of how we learn kindness without it being a trivial form of, you know, just schmaltzy. How do we do it so our lives become defined by sort of kindness that frankly will make our lives rather hard? Actually, a lot harder than they would be, probably, in some ways, than if we weren't kind. But reflecting what you said, Faith, about the massive return you get on adopting, I would imagine that that's the case in most cases. But the risk is there. And I think that is the thing about kindness. If there is no risk, how can it be kind? So you might get beaten up, you might fail, but then you come about the need for what is resilience. And resilience has to be, you know, continued kindness. There's nothing more than that. If you can continue in kindness of that sort, you've got to be the most resilient person I've ever met. You know, maybe that's what we can learn, you know, why not?
Yeah. Well, you don't expect a thank you. After all, remember, you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
And for the universe. You're not doing it for that person. And, you know, I think one of the biggest faults of pride is to expect gratitude, you know, and you should not expect gratitude. You should be thankful for that you have the opportunity, the money, maybe sometimes, the time, the whatever it is, to do something kind. And if you get thanked, you should say, like what Colin Powell once said to me, when I said, "What can I do for you?" You know, pass it on. He said, you can take one child out of the world. That's what he wanted me to do. I go, I don't know. So then you go to like this narcissistic thing. I don't think I'd be a very good mother. I don't know. You know, I'm a workaholic. I'm this, I'm that. But then I just did it. And man, I just want to tell everybody who's going to adopt a kid now, when I saw that little girl sitting in China between these two orphanage like people, and when they stepped away, she flopped over because she had such rickets. Rickets are what sailors get when they don't get enough vitamin D, you know, softness in the joints. But my pediatrician here, Jane Aronson, warned me of this. You know, she just flopped over, but she was so beautiful. And like I picked her up and we come here and we get like every kind of help possible. And she developed into an athlete and she's fine. You know, it wasn't an act of kindness. Somebody was being kind to me, actually. You are going to get such a thrill the day you walk into that place and you go, "That's my child." You write to me about it. You will not believe how your heart will turn over and over and that's just the beginning of your beautiful journey.
Yeah. So John, is there a center for human kindness in the future of Henley?
It's very interesting. There was a guy called Sri Kumar Rao, I think at Harvard or somewhere years back, and a couple of others who started programs on kindness and living. And another guy called Alain de Botton, philosopher, atheist philosopher, started the School of Life. It's so fascinating that what they teach us at school is all this wonderful stuff to make a living, you know, rather than make a being or whatever it is. And so we have to learn all the rest of it afterwards. So we learn about divorce, death, pain, money, you know, relationships, happiness, how to balance those things, you know, in a different way. So absolutely. And I think you can just see about the amazing interaction on this, on the chat thing here. I just want those people to speak. They're so articulate. They've got so many stories. It's wonderful that I think this is it for all of us. It's not about, I think if you run an institution of some sort, you're not running it for you. It must be a service. And you're in that, and it's not to make you great, it's to provide something better in life. And so we have to do this, not because, and we have to do it even though we're probably lousy at it, but we've got to have a go. It's our service to try. And we're going to try. And so we're going to have a go at it. And hopefully somebody will watch us and do it even better. And we'll just keep that dynamic going. And it's not because it's just feel good, it's because we have to be strong in so many ways in life. And there's so many hard things we have to deal with. But at the heart of it, it's not enmity and violence and aggression and unkindness that make the world work. It's not, we start working collaboratively. As somebody said earlier, kids are not born that way. Yeah. And we have to work socially. We are social, even our minds work socially. We have to understand what we're doing. The way we've trained ourselves to make money in the world and build organizations and countries was good for a while, but it can't work anymore. The problems are too great. The consequences are too great. We've got to find a way to collaborate hugely across countries and across organizations, across continents. We can't be American, or we're humans trying to solve big human problems. We have to create movements to make that happen. And that sort of kindness doesn't always seem gentle on the surface. It's more of a warrior kindness. When I say warrior, it's not a heroic masculine archetype. I don't mean that. I mean, you know, the capacity of all of us together to solve problems. I think that's what we are going to have to do. And I think that's what a good business school must do. So to answer your question in a word, yes.
Very good.
I just want to say that when you know, on a more one-on-one level, on a more personal level, you reminded me, you know, when they're online, the parents are online, the kid cries and they hit them. When you hit a child, you're really beating up their soul and their ability to express love and kindness. And I know this is not, maybe a lot of people don't believe in, get in the way. If you see somebody doing that to a child, be loud. See, don't hit your child. You're hurting you. Don't do that. Or as I say, I'm a pediatrician and may I help you, ma'am or sir? I'd like to help you because you are your pediatrician of the world. And you know, you say, you know, let's pick that baby up. Do you want, you know, when I brought my my kid back from the first one, Georgia, back from China, it was called like the orphan train. You know, everybody on the plane had adopted somebody. And they're crying and screaming, and all the attendants said, "Can I?" Because you're not used to that. You know, can I take that baby for a little while? Can I walk that baby up the aisle and down the aisle? And maybe that's what you should say to the person online. Can I hold that baby for a minute while you pay? You know, so I say when you see an unkindness or a violence, step in between.
Yeah.
So there's a very good question which Lorraine Jenks raised. I don't know if you want to touch on it, John. Do you think someone like Trump, and again, Trump's an archetype, can actually feel empathy and show kindness? And a psychologist said probably not. So what does a kind person do when you're dealing with people who cannot be kind, or psychopathic, or have a pathology or something? What does kindness mean in that? Because, you know, if somebody is not going to bend to your will by you being kind, how do you then be kind to the system? You know, how does Joe Biden or whoever it is, or those Republicans who don't fully believe in that, how do you be kind in that world? Because the other people are not going to be kind just because you're kind to them. They're not. So how do we handle that one? That's
Trump
the one
is a beautiful example of a violent father and a mother who was a housekeeper. He never talks about that. She was a housekeeper, and I guess she was kind of in servitude to the father, or she didn't stand up for him. Nobody stood up for him, and he was bullied, and he was beaten, and he was humiliated. And if you want an example of what that can do to a person, if they're bullied or humiliated or hit or yelled at or attacked, look at Donald Trump. That's what you get. And I think that should be a lesson to everybody. And if he's mean and horrible, you can just understand where it comes from. But you know, you're allowed to step away. And that's what America did. They stepped away from his brutality. And I think that that was a beautiful act of kindness to ourselves, as you said earlier.
Yeah. So Faith, I mean, if I were to sum that up, you're saying when you, kindness is an energy you need to bring in. So step in, get in the way. That's not a gentle act. It's brave. It's dangerous. It's potentially harmful to you.
Yeah.
But
most people online aren't going to shoot you if you just say, "Can I hold your baby for a minute?" You know, I know, I say to people, I know it's really hard. It really is. If you have a lot of problems and you're overwhelmed and maybe you don't have a job or whatever, and your kid's screaming their head off on the line, and, you know, maybe you need someone to hold that baby for a minute for you.
Yeah.
Maybe the act of kindness is to the parent.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense, actually. The kid may not see it as kindness, but it may be a kindness to the parent.
Yeah.
There was another great story. I just wanted to mention the rabbi that I mentioned told me about it. There was a very famous rabbi in New York, very old guy, hard to see, was very busy. A young man wanted to spend 15 minutes with this rabbi, finally got his chance. And the rabbi was in an apartment in New York. Young man got there very excited, had a rushed meeting with the rabbi and got a lot out of it. And then was leaving. The old rabbi said, "I'm going somewhere. Why don't you walk me down to the car?" So he walked him down, they chatted in the lift, they finished up their conversation, and so the young man opened the door for the rabbi to get into this cab, and then closed the door for the rabbi, who then drove off. And a little way down the road, the old rabbi said to the cab driver, "Can you just pull over? That young man slammed my thumb in the door." And so
he slammed his what in the door?
Slammed the rabbi's thumb in the door.
Oh.
And so the cab driver said to him, "But why didn't you say something like then? Why did you leave it?" And he said, "Can you imagine what a harmful memory that would be for that young man? We had this brilliant conversation, and all he would remember would be that he hurt me. And it's just a thumb."
Oh.
I thought it was a pretty good, it's a parable. I mean, it's a beautiful story about being big enough, to your point, to sometimes just show up in a different way, you know.
Yeah, you know, it's true. You know, in my work with Karen Zoid, she was asked me to write, you know, we start like this with lyrics, write letters to my kids. And in one of the letters I said, you know, words cannot be erased. That's what the rabbi was saying. Unkindness cannot be erased. You always remember that. So if you can just keep quiet just a moment, you know, you'll have a much better reward later. And I think that's true.
Yeah. Perhaps kindness is about holding not just the baby, but the hatred, the anger, the pain of other people.
Frustration. Hold it back just for a few minutes. And a lot of times it dissipates too.
Right. Jon, do you find that there's place for teachers to, you spoke a lot about supporting people through the process. Do you think we lose people from education through acts of unkindness by educational institutions?
Well, I think yes, and attract them with kindness. I think the biggest difficulty is seeing what years of a particular sort of practice and orientation has created in terms of institutions. And we'll rail against the institution, but the mindsets, the behaviors, whatever, have built these things. And one of the hardest things to deal with is just non-personal institutional unkindness, the way things are processed. You know, and they've been created by people, but people have removed themselves from the system and have stopped to see. So, you know, when we have a bad service experience, or we phone up and kept waiting, or somebody's dismissive of us when we got something like even the electricity, whatever it is, we rail against that. Now the person you're talking to is not being unkind, or sometimes they are, because they've had a lot of rage directed at them. But they're trying to do their job, but it goes up to this opaque layer. And I think what we have to do is really start reflecting on the nature of the institutions we have. One of the ways to do that is to think about what is the experience people are having. And people make money out of, you know, user experience, UX or customer experience. They make money out of it, but at the heart of that is making things a bit better, a bit easier. Sometimes it's not a good thing because it might be about consumerism or things we don't need. Sometimes it's a really good thing. So how do we create these institutions in a way that that we automated things into an institution? Those automated things called institutions are often dangerous. We have to learn to unpack them. There's a wonderful story I told the other day about monkeys in a cage. You know, it's quite long. I won't tell you about it. But the end point is that, you know, if you create systems and protocols and policies, nobody ever changes them. They have their own life, and they live for decades. And we have to really start being conscious and attacking the automated processes around us, because however kind we are, unless we can unpack the things we've created, they're going to continue to be unkind. So how do you create organizations and engagements and institutions that matter to people and that help people? Like you see with Obamacare happening now, you know, maybe it will, maybe it won't be destroyed, you know, but it's an institutional device, you know, which by its own nature is anathema to other people in the USA, because it's providing something that people deeply feel is wrong. And what it's providing is good healthcare to poor people. How can that be wrong? So you've got to think hard through these. This is not an easy thing. When you start thinking about kindness into the world we live and what we create in terms of organizations. That's a business school answer, Jon. Yeah.
So I'm going to start to wrap this up, and I'd like to just take out some concrete next steps. So we're going to, number one, download the chat. We're going to record that, and we're going to make that available so that people can read the great thinking that's been going on during this time. The next one is we are going to follow up on this idea of exploring possibly an adoption. And I'll keep you informed. We'll make a web page. I'm just going to do this on behalf of the marketing team. We're going to build a web page, and we're going to call it the Henley Kindness Bank or Kind Bank. We'll figure it out. We'll link up with you, Faith, if that's okay. Keep you informed. Sure. John, we will look into a scholarship, and we will figure out.
We won't look into it. We won't look into it. We'll do it.
Okay, brilliant.
We're going to do it. We're just going to find who to give it to.
Excellent. I love when John does that because there's a process, because it's a business school and we regulate it. So we've got to figure out how we give it away, but we will do that on the web page, and I'll make sure it all works. And then we can talk on this Kindness Bank perhaps about either doing this again sometime to check how we're doing, or work towards a center for kindness and see if we can find amongst these brilliant people who are thinking on here a faculty of some description. A group of minds that are prepared to dedicate some kind of energy to developing a practice for kindness that works for people. How does that sound?
That sounds wonderful, John. I just want to say, as Professor John said, I'm not saying I'll help with adoption. I will support anybody who wants to adopt a child. With your help, John, to help me operate it, absolutely, for sure. And maybe in a year from now, 6 months from now, we can bring all these kids together and say, look what we did. Look what we did here. And I think you just pass it on, and we'll just keep passing it on until we overflow all the people that were raised harshly with people that were raised with kindness. And the kindness emanated really from, the Johns here and Carmen and the starter. This is a starter kit for kindness.
And faith. I think faith is a key ingredient in this entire conversation. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time.
Thank you. It was wonderful
to take time out of a busy day and just talk about kindness. What a cool thing, and come out with some new brains who've been kind of working on the problem for us in the chat bar, which is brilliant. And let's get some action going. So I'll chat to the team tomorrow and let's get some results.
And give yourself a hug.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you so much. It was wonderful seeing you again. Let's keep connecting. Yes.
Absolutely.
And John, thank you very much. And thanks to everybody. It's absolutely marvelous you came to listen. Let's get something going here.
Yes, we will. I know we will.
Brilliant.
Lots of love and kindness to you guys. I love you all, and Carmen. And all of South Africa.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you very much. Let's make sure we save the chat. Mamo, I think I have. If you can too, that will be brilliant. Hit save.
Yeah, we're going to save it.
Brilliant. And thank you so much to all of you. Thank you for the big contribution to the chat. We will make it available. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you.